to Victoria Rumble Room, a show that strives to bring you stories from a local level. We're broadcasting here from British Columbia on Vancouver Island, but we're also national across Canada, and we're interested in all sorts of international stories and issues and all the things going on. And one of the guys that loves to know what's going on is my partner in crime over in his Saanich bunker, the Croatian sensation himself, John Jurisic. And John, indeed, busy times.
Robin, love your introductions. And more very appropriate. You know, we actually have universal appeal, interplanetary appeal. And that's because there's so much to talk about, Robin. Let's just start with BC. At long last, finally, after much activity, the NDP kicks out the only other challenger, and David Eby is now the new leader, soon to be the 37th Premier of BC. Right off the top, he's promising in his first 100 days to improve the world. That includes public safety, healthcare, and access to affordable housing.
And you're looking around and you can't find a place you can afford to buy, you can't find a place you can afford to rent, we are on your side.
Mr. Eby has already been the housing minister for a long while. And obviously what he's promising isn't easy. Are we going to cut him some slack on the first week of the job? What do you make of him, Robin?
Well, you know, I do think we need to give him a bit of a come and show us how you can do, a Missouri kind of attitude of show me. Proof to us you can do the job. So when it comes to affordable housing, he's been the housing minister for quite some time. It's a very tough job. We'll see how he does with that. Doctor shortage, it's massive. He's come up with some ideas already. We'll see where that goes. And public safety seems to be a big topic right across the country right now. How can we deal with this? A recent example we've had close to home, the terrible, tragic death of a Burnaby RCMP constable. And it was a situation following a complaint. A Burnaby constable by the name of Shailene Yang joined a social worker as she entered a tent. She was stabbed to death. She managed to shoot her assailant. He's in hospital recovering. And we're all just shocked by this. And it just seems like it goes on and on, this violence. And I have a message. I have a message for the Premier. So here's my recipe for our new Premier, David Eby. And it's really a call to action to clean things up. It's not right wing. It's not left wing. It's common sense. First, no more catch and release of people destined for jail or the courts. If you do the crime, you do the time. If you're really going to be ready for rehabilitation, fine, but let's start it behind bars. And many people are living very hard on our streets and they are suffering, some from drug addiction, some from mental illness, many from both of these things. We don't have enough facilities for these people. We need more mental health facilities, more drug addiction facilities. And when people go in, they shouldn't be coming out again until there's measurable improvement. We have to have some accountability and make these programs and institutions relevant. And we also have to think about what are the real issues in terms of our future in the tent city scenario when you consider most of our tent cities are inhabited by these same people. I don't think we have a tent city problem. I don't think we have a homelessness on the street problem if we deal with these other items. So I suggest we get to it. And John, I also understand you have a few things to say about Mr. Eby's healthcare plans.
First of all, mic drop. Brilliant points of view, all of which I agree with. Robin, thank you. I'm very pleased to hear he's making the doctor shortage a priority in the immediate future. David Eby, I guess I should get that right starting today, says he's going to make changes to give doctors more incentive to stay in family practice. Thank you. He's also says he's going to encourage foreign trained doctors to open offices here. Thank you.
And John, you were at a rally that was held at the legislature lawns again by BC Healthcare Matters. calling for immediate change. Doctors now, I understand that Jennifer Lush was again at that event. You had a chance to speak to her about what David Eby had to say and what her feedback might have been.
Yeah, it was yet another great event, another continuing advocacy for the doctor shortage. And Dr. Lush was a keynote speaker. And she said, we need to make conditions better for all of our family doctors in BC. Only with better conditions will foreign trained doctors consider coming here. Dr. Lush was a number of speakers at the event where the theme was, we need doctors now.
Your health is like a bicycle wheel. When everything's rolling smoothly, you hardly notice all the working parts. Your healthcare system is like a bicycle wheel as well. It functions best with a spoke and hub model, and at its center is the family doctor.
I've had a doctor for 47 years in my youth, and I'm 72 years old now, and I don't have a family doctor anymore. He retired 2 years ago, and he can't even get into the clinic, so I'm kind of, thankfully, I'm in good shape, and I'm healthy, and I'm not on any medications, and I'm feeling very good. So, but who knows, next week I could be in trouble,
That's a crazy story, Paul.
Yeah.
What do you think about from what you know? Is the government doing enough to look after this problem?
I think this is, John, in my opinion, this has been going on for 30 years. We should have dealt with this problem 30 years ago, and it was not addressed. Everybody just shoved it off and put it off and put it off. Now it's a crisis.
If you want to call this a provincial crisis or a national crisis, it's affecting you and me.
Robin, the crowd at the legislature was a little smaller this time. Could have been a whole bunch of factors, but frankly, I think folks are waiting and taking a wait and see attitude to all of the announcements that have already been made. Government has announced more money for newly graduating doctors. Thank you. And we're all hoping for more funding announcements soon to encourage physicians to stay in family medicine. Thank you. So let's stay tuned. Let's see.
Indeed, John, it wasn't the only event that was taking place too. Downtown, there was a big rally of people who were out marching on the street down to the legislature, and they are in solidarity about the way women particularly, but people in general, are being treated in Iran right now. There has been a massive protest underway there. Iranian Canadians, Iranian students studying here, many Canadian supporters out on the street, several weeks of marches and rallies and deaths in Iran. And, it's terrible to see this taking place because women have chosen to maybe be a little bit more casual about their headscarves. And one woman did this and was dragged away and was actually beaten to death. And there's been shootings and killings galore since then. All sorts of protests. And so you have to wonder what's going to happen here. Well, Cheryl Thomas is somebody who is based in Victoria. She's been an instructor at Royal Road University, University of Victoria, University of Canada West, and she has taught students in Iran. She was there for 8 years doing that, originally for Royal Roads, and then she actually was working as a consultant. Fascinating to get her perspective on what's going on. Let's zoom her in. Now joining us for the first time in the Victoria Rumble Room is Cheryl Thomas, an instructor par excellence with University of Canada West, and she also teaches at UVic. Cheryl, so great to have you on the program.
Great to join you, Robin.
And Cheryl, you did work in Iran for a number of years, and I believe it was about 8 years in total. And you went there originally with Royal Roads. You were teaching business courses to students there. You know a fair amount about the situation on the ground for Iranian students who are studying. And these are well-educated, bright people, but obviously working in a very different environment than we're used to. And there's now this huge, huge conflict. It's been on for a month. People are being killed. People are being beaten in the streets. And yet it goes on and on. It sounds like it started around an issue around headscarves, but obviously, in your mind, it must be a lot more deep-rooted than that.
Yeah, it is a lot more deep-rooted. And You know, what happens is every few years there's some big protests in the streets, particularly in Tehran, and then they kill enough people that people go back into their houses. But when I was there, if I heard the term before the revolution once, I heard it in every other conversation. People talking about what life was like before the Islamic Revolution and what it is like now. And they were just so sick and tired of this regime who has almost bankrupted the country and made their lives very, very difficult. I often said in Iran, it's like you got to fly below the radar screen. You just, you have some freedoms, you float the rules, but you got to kind of fly below the radar screen. Unfortunately, that moves. And so what you get away with one day, you don't get away with the next day. And when it comes to the scarves are just a symbol. Yes, I had to wear the scarf when I was in Iran as well. And in one of my classes, one of the older guys said to me, Cheryl, what do you think of the scarf? And I said, no Todorov, which is their word for being very polite. And he said, yeah. I said, I hate it. I said, it's uncomfortable, it itches, it won't stay on my head anyways, and I can't hear in the classroom. And I said, and you know what? It makes all of your women disappear. If I see the men from behind, I know who they are. If I see the women from behind, I don't know who they are. And he said, well, I understand, but our wives get used to it. And all the women in the class turned around and said, we do not. And yeah, so it is something that they tolerate because they've had to. But, the country has moved away from the scarf issue. It is just kind of a symbol of the oppression. And these young people are fed up. It's been 40 years of this oppression, and they're fed up. The unemployment rate of those under 35 is 25 to 35%. What have they got to lose? They're just going, we can't tolerate this anymore. And so they are going to the streets, and their parents are terrified. But young children are going to the streets, and this regime are even killing the children, and they keep on coming.
Obviously, a very passionate and tragic scenario ongoing in Iran. It's such an honor to have you on a program, and I think courageous for you to join us. Thank you. I think and suspect that you stay in contact with people back in Iran and know Iranian women in this country, in Canada, who are nervous to speak out publicly. I've come across a few myself. How dangerous is it for women or men to demand change in Iran these days?
It's dangerous. It is dangerous. And yes, I am in contact with lots of folks back there, but honestly, I haven't been in the last month because I don't want to message them and put them on the radar screen, because in the Middle East, not just Iran, you must assume someone is watching and listening all the time. So I am just careful now. I don't contact them directly. I have talked to folks who've talked to folks. I have talked to folks who've been there and have come back. But yeah, there is that fear. And again, in 2009, when I came home, that was when there was the selection of Ahmadinejad, when the majority of people did not vote for him, but in 45 minutes, they declared him elected. And people in the millions went to the streets then. And when I came home that summer, people warned me, do not speak out. Do not say anything. You will put us all at risk. I think this time people are saying, to hell with it. Speak out, tell the story, be our advocate, because we can't keep having them threaten us. We have to stop this. Is it going to be successful this time? I don't know.
Let's just chat a little bit about these courageous and brave women who are putting their lives and families and futures on the line, and what it was like for you to teach them. Were these women, young women, were they informed and curious about how the wider world worked at that time? And did you sense they realized that they were being treated unfairly and clearly oppressively?
Oh, of course. Of course. Very, very intelligent women. And I will say some of my students from then are outside Iran now and leading the charge outside Iran. One of my students has been on Swiss TV numerous times and has been a spokesperson for the protests there in Switzerland. You know, the women in Iran are very well educated. 60-some% of the students in universities are women. And they're very well educated. I saw women in all levels of jobs. One woman there owns a trucking company. I mean, it's not what we are shown and perceive from the West. And they have a saying in Farsi, she who must be obeyed. I think we have a similar one in Canada, right? It's the women who run things. Whether that's in the front or behind the scenes. They're very, very strong. And I sometimes say to people here, have you met a Persian woman? And they go, oh yeah, wow. Are they aggressive? I'm going, yeah, they're the same at home. And they're angry because under Islamic law, they are only considered half a person.
Cheryl, just to build upon a comment you made you just said that there was a demonstration, somebody participated in Zurich, I think you said, or Switzerland. I note that there are major demonstrations of support all over the world, hundreds of thousands of people showing up. It doesn't necessarily translate itself to a North America media. We've had marchers actually in Victoria just recently, in London, Berlin. Does this international condemnation make any difference or make any effect on the Iranian government?
Yes and no. So, there was 100,000 in Berlin? And that news made the Iranian official news, except they presented it as people protesting gas prices. They didn't say what it was about. They were just because they've had protests in Iran against the price of gas as well. So they were just say, see, it's around the world. We're no different. On the other hand, I do believe that for the people who really understand diplomacy and what it takes to be be a global citizen in Iran, they understand that there's more pressure from outside this time. The hardliners, no, they're going to just use it as, see, these are just influence from the West. It's the West that are infiltrating and stirring things up. It's not people upset with us. So yeah, yes and no. John, how's that for an answer?
So Cheryl, we're almost ready to wrap this, and I'm sorry about that, because I could just talk about this for all day. I think it's just so interesting. Your position right with a huge, well-known landmark from, I guess it's from Tehran and Iran, where you spent all that time, and maybe you could talk about that, and maybe also leave us with some thoughts on what Iranians here must be feeling about their helplessness in doing anything about this, and also their fear of, if they do anything or say anything, how that could come back and hurt their families.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, this is Azadi Tower behind me. And there's an interesting story. Azadi means freedom. So, and this is a beautiful square in Tehran. It's a beautiful structure. But the architect is an Iranian Canadian guy who lives in Vancouver right now. His name is Hossein Amanat. And what's interesting is it was called the Shah Tower, built in honor of the Shah at that time. And then at the revolution, they changed the name to Azadi, Freedom Square. However, the architect is Baha'i, and it was not safe for him to stay in Iran, and he had to flee Iran at that time, and he fled to Canada, and he's a quite famous architect in Canada as well. Does beautiful work, but I always saw the irony of it being called Azadi Square. But it is a focal point that brings people together in Tehran whenever there are protests. That's where they will gather. But another thing that's interesting this time is that the protests are throughout the country. Before, it would be in Tehran and it would be in some of the larger cities, but not across the country. This time it is across the country, in villages even. And so, you know, they might stop it this time, they're not going to stop it forever. Every corrupt regime, there is an end. It's just when is the end? I don't know. But this is a very corrupt regime.
But if people were to speak out, you're willing to speak to us, but if Iranian people that live here or are going to school here were to speak out, they have serious concerns of what could happen at home.
They do. And, you know, frankly, I've had the same concerns, but I also think being quiet isn't helpful. And, you know, yes, they are fearful for their friends and family back home. They're asking, what can we do? And again, what they're just trying to do, I think what most of them are trying to do is organize these protests so that there is some pressure from international agencies, put pressure on their own governments to put pressure on Iran. That, you know, they've increased sanctions again on the SEPA, the secret police, the morality police who, you know, pull women over for showing hair out of their scarves, etc. But, you know, they are fearful, but they're also going, you know, people just are going to the streets. We're not going to stop them. And they are worried about how many more people are going to be killed, but they also know they have to do what they can as far as raising money and raising awareness and organizing the protests and continuing to pressure our own governments to take action against the Iranian government. They realize that the pressure needs to come from the international community.
It's so interesting to hear from a Canadian and a person from Vancouver Island who spent so much time in the Middle East. I know a lot of Iranian Canadians also feel very strongly about what's happening, very passionate, very involved, and many fear to speak out. Imagine that. They're fearing to speak out because they don't want family or friends back home to suffer. Gee. But if an Iranian, however, would like to contact us and speak to their situation and join us on the Rumble Room, we'd love to have you. That would be very courageous and very brave, and we would help facilitate your message. Send us a note. We'll make it happen.
Absolutely, John. And we're interested in these international conflicts. We've been following closely, of course, what's been going on in Ukraine, and we've interviewed Ukrainians up until now. We're always welcoming more because we think these stories are so important, because so many people in Canada, so many people right here in Vancouver Island and Victoria have links to these places. It's surprising how many people we know that are directly involved with the war in Ukraine or the terrible things going on in Iran. And so it's important that we able to share this information and bring people up to date. And also the war continues in Ukraine. The Ukrainian offensive is having some success, but drones are hitting power stations, huge portions of Ukraine struggling to maintain electricity. The winter is coming, and the spirit of the Ukrainians continues to be unbending. And Johnny, we have some viewer mail now about the drones that we reported last week. We were talking about these drones that are actually being shipped in from Iran. And we got lots of feedback on that.
I'm just startled, Robin. Continue to be startled by how much viewer mail we get on our main sort of venue, social media venue, that being Facebook. Thank you to everyone. Here's an example. Bill writes us: the Iranians figured out how to hack a U.S. spy drone several years back, brought it into a gliding crash landing, reverse engineered it, and advanced their own drone program almost overnight.
And Mike was a little bit more direct in his comment about the conflict and about the drones. Iran has declared war in Ukraine. Treat them, I assume when he's saying that, he's talking about the Russians, treat them accordingly.
And Debbie seems to take exception to your comment last week, Robin, that Russia has turned to Iran for drones because it doesn't have many friends. She writes, Russia doesn't have any friends? Where did that come from? Not very well informed about that part.
Well, Deb, I guess that's an interesting perspective I don't happen to share when you consider, I mean, who are Russia's friends right now? Iran, a theocracy, or, well, the hermit state itself, the closed down country, the dictatorship of North Korea, and nominal support from places like China and India, but it's not exactly a huge contingent of backers for Russia. So I'll stand by my position and feel comfortable with that. Still appreciate you sending us your thoughts, and we are happy to share that on the Rumble Room. Appreciate people expressing their opinion. And on that note, John, we're almost out of time, so perhaps again you could talk about how people can follow the show, write us notes, be part of the Rumble Room family.
That's right. We like to follow our model, rumble on. And we do that in many different ways. For example, our Facebook page, main avenue of interaction. We have a Twitter page, very active and somewhat controversial. We have a YouTube site where all of our videos are housed. We have a news and views site that we have on Facebook that allows people to interact with our show in different ways. Instagram page, TikTok page, which is becoming fascinating. Come and join all of this, please. Such an interesting show today. Continues to be interesting every week. I can't wait till next week, but for now I remain as humble as I can possibly be, the Croatian sensation, Johnny Jurisic.
And Johnny, the Croatian sensation, you sound like a wrestler, a WWF wrestler, and I feel like you're water boy. I'm Robin Adair, just grateful to be on the same team, and rumble on.